Australians are worried about petrol. We always are. We're always keeping an eye on what the price is, but we are, of course, concerned right now because we are hearing about panic buying. We are hearing about long queues. This was one in Sydney today. Now, that wasn't because petrol was running out. It was because they were selling it for less than $2 a litre. One of the locals spoke to the news outlet saying that lines stretched back 100 metres from the Mascot BP fuel station. That happened this morning. One Mascot resident in Sydney's south said the queues for fuel have been stretching out the front of her house all week, of course, since the war began, with things really kicking into overdrive during school pickup hours. The resident said the situation was, quote, very tame on Monday morning, but she has seen some abuse that is hurled at frustrated drivers. Quote, people will hold their horns down for a minute straight, and the language they use is horrible. The top of their lungs, it's disgusting. If I don't see it, I hear it. People will beep all day long. Now, we're being told by those in the know that Australia is not running out of petrol, at least tonight.
There's absolutely no reason for panic anything. Panicking, full stop, panic buying.
Australians shouldn't need to panic buy.
We don't want people panic buying.
By the way, the bloke from the NRMA was very clever today when he was on with Andrew Clennell a bit earlier, saying that this isn't COVID, it's not toilet paper, but the reality is that there are signs that while major cities aren't running out, there are parts in regional Australia, the reports coming back to us, that are starting to run out of fuel. Now, whether this is because of the buying cycle, whether it is because of the panic buying, who knows? But again, Barnaby Joyce, speaking on behalf of the regions as a representative of One Nation, he told my mate Andrew Clennell this afternoon, there is a problem regardless of what the government is trying to tell you.
This is the first time in our history that the Straits of Hormuz has been closed, and I just want to hear from the government if they've got a plan. It seems like they haven't, or at least be honest to say that they haven't got a plan, in which case we can deliver one. But at this point in time, there's like nothing to see here. That is patently absurd. The Nikkei's just gone down 7%. With the oil prices are going through the roof, and it's reacting to supply.
And while the majority of Australians, if they access the fuel, they're going to be doing it at petrol, well, of course, diesel, and diesel being purchased at wholesale, that is apparently already becoming a problem. Now, Australia's fuel security, or the lack therein of, has been something I have talked about for years. Bob Katter has championed this issue for as long as he's been in the parliament. Australia does not drill for that much oil, and we don't refine that much petrol once we have the oil. As I've told you before, we get most of it from Southeast Asian countries, and they get almost all of it from the Middle East. So a 20% cut-off means with less coming in, the price starts to go up, and then eventually the amount that is making it to Singapore and then eventually to Sydney is going to be a problem. Again, we are only a week and a bit into the war, but this is why I talked about that Strait of Hormuz being locked off. People like Andrew Hastie have talked about it of recent times as well, that Australia, depending on who you believe and how you count it, doesn't even have a month's worth of supply when it comes to this. Now, despite the fact they've been the government, not just for one full electoral term, but now coming up on another full year, 4 full years in power, an entire Olympiad, an entire American presidency, guess who Chris Bowen is blaming for us not having enough fuel?
The more fuel supply we have on hand, the better. And I'm very glad that we now have 15 more than in any times than in 15 years. And I do note that when we came to office, the stock was held in Texas and Louisiana. Mr Speaker, now I'm not sure whether you call that the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico, but it's certainly not the Gulf of Australia. We introduced minimum holding stocks. This was work that was not conducted by the previous government. The previous government saw 4 out of 6 petroleum refineries closed when they were in charge.
Don't you love it? The refineries full of union workers with union contracts and all of the ballyhoo that goes with that. That in part is why big global companies on the other side of the world say it's too expensive to do business here. It's why in part our car industry got torn away. Oh no, but Labor thinks you're an idiot. So, this all closed down because of the Libs. And the Libs are the ones responsible. Now, I was critical at the time of the plan to be keeping fuel anywhere but Australia. Deals were done that eventually, yes, America would give us a little bit, but all too little too late, don't like it. said it all the way through. Again, shout out to Bob Catter. He's had straight eye on this. But while the government wants to tell us nothing to see here, there's no problem, don't panic buy, don't worry about it. Again, don't panic buy. But could somebody please tell Chris Bowen that it is a problem being noticed by other significant countries around the world? In fact, the G7, as we speak tonight, is working out how they are going to be able to get around this significant problem. As I feared last week, the predictions now start to come true about another flow-on of all of this, and that is inflation. Because everything needs to be driven around the country. As you know, it doesn't grow at your local shops. It needs to be driven. It needs to be driven in a truck. And despite Zali Steggall and the rest of them saying it can all be done with electric cars, it's currently running on diesel. And if diesel is going to dry up and diesel's going to cost more, then everything is going to cost more. It's something we'll talk about tonight with Matt Canavan. But the AMP's chief economist, and this is not some far right-wing person I'm reaching for to make a point here. This is a pretty direct guy in Shane Oliver, and he said that with further increase in global oil prices, motorists should prepare for more near-term pain. Last week we were telling you there's a chance this thing could get close to $3. $3 a litre, goodness me, and only after a week. Not 6 months of war, just over, 6, 7, 8, 9 days of war. The ordinary household, when it comes to oil prices, is going to start to cost $14 more a week. Put that together, $700 a year. And I do love this, it's a small price to pay. Well, that's fine and fair enough if you've got the extra $700 and you're not going to notice it. That's not nothing. It means that people are likely to look for ways to save money elsewhere, cutting spending so they can afford petrol for the car. Oliver says it's going to push up inflation. Another group, National Australia Bank. They say petrol prices alone will get us to an inflation rate. Remember, 2 to 3 is when they bring down interest rates. We're on our way between 3 and 4. They say it's going to go above 5. That's basically some of the worst of the COVID times. Yes, it got up to a 6, but this is frightening. Inflation will peak above 5% in the second quarter, that being the next 3 months, unless the fuel benchmark prices retrace current levels over the coming weeks. Again, this is all spiked in 9 days. Trump says the war goes for a month. Iran says they can keep fighting at this level for 6 months. As you would have seen, a lot of people today got fired up because there was some changes when it came to the stock market. Not a great day if you're somebody who had it all bet on what the markets were going to do today. Of course, the reality is that people don't play the game like that. Of course, the Reserve Bank, they're looking at the inflation rates as well. There's a meeting in the next couple of weeks about interest rates. So remember, 13 interest rate rises. There were a couple of drops last year. One of them has already been cancelled out. We're going to basically be back to the worst of it in just a couple of months' time. Again, the stock market today. Now, have a look at this in perspective. Now, obviously, today, bad day. But just this time last week, the stock market was at an all-time high. And given the wide spread of stocks that took a hit today, not all of them have a direct or even indirect link to what is happening in the Middle East. I would suggest there are some people, as they like to say, a little bit of profit taking, right? They bought it for this much, it hit a record price, jump out now, maybe use the profit, reinvest somewhere else. So let's see where we go in the next couple of days. Futures market not looking good in the US. That happens all overnight. We will talk again tomorrow, but obviously Pete will have the latest information as well as Business Now, 4:30 in the afternoon with Ross Greenwood. Which brings us to an uncomfortable bit of this. Now, we know that Iran has got plenty of missiles, plenty of drones. We know that it has done as much damage as it can possibly do to any and everything that it can possibly hit. We know that they have taken lives in Israel, they've taken lives in neighbouring countries, and that, of course, has seen them friendless. The good news is that the amount of missiles they're able to fire is dropping dramatically, down 90% from the first days of the war. Now, the missiles are one thing, drones are something else, but in the arm wrestle of who's got more things to shoot at somebody else, it's the United States and Israel that would be winning that fight at the moment. But of course, the problems of oil and petrol and diesel are going to echo around the world. If we are in a scenario where right now, today, in some parts of Australia, there's a fuel queue because it's under $2. There may well end up being a fuel queue in 2 weeks' time because of the amount of supply that is actually able to make it to Australia. let alone, again, what independent retailers are telling us in regional Australia. This is where you can be my eyes and ears. I trust your accounts. Tell me if you are seeing any sort of change, not just with price, but maybe in places that are saying, sorry, mate, we don't get a delivery for another couple of days. Send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au. But after Iran decided to hit petrol supplies in Saudi Arabia, their promise to blow anything out of the water that's going to be moving fuel in that Strait of Hormuz, circled there, thanks to our mates at Fox News, then this becomes a problem that becomes a potential political one for Donald Trump back in the United States. Now, their market will probably take a hit today, but again, it's already at, 50,000 points, so there's plenty of, dare I say, some fat in the American stock market. But in terms of the realpolitik, inflation is something that helped kill the Biden administration, and we already know that he's on the back foot when it comes to polling. I'll get to that in a second. But the president is trying to appeal to the citizens of his own country and the Western world that all of this, yes, while difficult, is a, quote, small price to pay. If you haven't seen his Truth Social, let me read it. Short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over. Well, yesterday he said that they had already won the war, so, okay. Very small price to pay for the USA and the world and the safety and peace. Only fools would think differently. Now, do not put me in the pile of those that says that this war shouldn't have been taking place, but I'm a person who also can think two things at the same time. The consequence of the price pressures, the inflation pressures, and how that affects the entire world, from how much it costs you to fill a tank to how much it costs a truck driver to fill theirs, to the producers who pay for the increased shipping costs, etc., 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 well, it flows through the whole market. And sadly, this generation is nowhere near as patient as the greatest generation who had to fight on the home front as well as see their families risk life and limb on the other side of the world during World War II. We know that if the internet goes out for 15 minutes, a panic ensues. When there is a global pandemic, apparently toilet paper is what they needed to start stocking up as if they had a bunker. But I mention all of this that potentially, in a political sense, the weapon that Iran may well be relying upon here is the inability of the world to pay the price, firstly because some people can't. And again, if you've got the money to weather all this through, in the same way there are plenty of people who've got money to weather through power prices. But you and I both know that in Australia, 3 and a bit million people run out of food, and that's when it's a good week. So these things get tight, and they get tight very quickly. Politically for Donald Trump. Now, he's never running for another election again, but his party is. They've got one in November. Now, if he loses the Congress, well, then a whole world of trouble starts. Firstly, he's not able to get anyone to replace anyone he sacks, like the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, because the Parliament won't be with him. And in the lower house, they'll just go for impeachment every other day. And to give you an idea about the politics of inflation, now, for some reason, it doesn't affect Anthony Albanese, but it does affect Donald Trump. This is the look since he started his presidency in the positive territory where people were approving of him on the issue of inflation. It's now 62% disapproving, and that's before a bomb was dropped, let alone the political cost that always comes with deaths. And there has been a 7th member of the Defence Forces in the United States who has been killed. Here's the details from Fox 9 in the US.
U.S. officials say another service member has died in the Middle East.
The military says that they died from their injuries sustained during an Iranian attack on February 28th in Saudi Arabia. This is the 7th American service member to be killed in this conflict.
And that question, troops on the ground. Now, my thinking about all of this, given that Trump had said that he declared victory a couple of days ago, my expectation was that maybe as early as this week, they were going to step back, keep giving all of the hardware to the Israelis to continue on with their campaign, but the active engagement of the United States may start to drop back. So the idea about troops on the ground, well, for some that's a red line that they are unwilling to cross, but it is an option that the Secretary of War is very much leaving on the table.
People ask boots on the ground, no boots on the ground, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, go in, go in. President Trump knows, I know, you don't tell the enemy, you don't tell the press, you don't tell anybody what your limits would be on an operation. We're willing to go as far as we need to in order to be successful.
Well, let's hope that that is sooner rather than later for all of those who have their families in harm's way. Now, so everything would be okay if everything was electric, right? If everything was renewable power, it would all be fantastic. Well, interesting reporting over the weekend that I wanted to bring you this evening, and it came from the Daily Telegraph, the Sunday Telegraph, which is the number of foreign companies and foreign individuals who are now the big money behind big renewables. An investigation by this masthead reveals that 6 of the 10 largest wind and solar projects are wholly owned by overseas entities, while a 7th is a majority controlled by a mix of Qatari and Chinese interests. Nothing to see here. Meanwhile, the companies ultimately behind 6 of the 10 biggest renewable power assets under construction are based offshore. This masthead can reveal that the foreign investors tapping into Australia's energy transition include the largest shareholders in Ferrari. Here's a little map to make the point for you that we had an opportunity, if this was the opportunity, to go from what was to what will be to make this an Australian asset. We have a scenario where foreign buyers are distorting the new housing market and foreign people and foreign companies are the ones that are building and thus getting a pretty penny at part back from our government here. You can see how many in Queensland, a couple in South Australia, a lot in New South Wales, and plenty of little dots in Victoria. Now, who owns what and why matters. Now, philosophically, those who were behind sell off the power assets to get a few $1 billion to pay for a train line, as it was in places like New South Wales. Guess what? Collectively wrong. Collectively wrong. Why? Because the private company takes over. The private company only exists to make a profit, and they jack all the way up. You've now got the foreign companies who only exist for a profit. Who knows whether they end up paying tax in this country? Outside of payroll tax, do they pay company tax here? But the idea that something that is as important as where the power comes from, having this level of foreign control, it should be a problem, right? But again, the government thinks you're too stupid to care. They think you're too stupid to care and that you don't notice. And if you do have resistance, you're just in the great pack to be ignored. These people find every possible way to sell this joint out. Every possible way, including where the power comes from for the next generation. Does this play out in the seat of Farah? We'll know in the next few weeks. May 9, 2 months away from when there is going to be that by-election. Last night we had a chat to the One Nation candidate, a bloke who's been very successful in business, a bloke who was Harvard educated and a bloke who is ready to get in behind Pauline, get in and work with Barnaby Joyce. He's on the ground right now. Barnaby Joyce, again, back to that conversation with Andrew Clennell this afternoon, says in his mind it doesn't come down to the Libs, current holders of the seat, or the Teal like it did at the last federal election. Instead, he thinks it comes down to the money from Sydney that backs in the Teal in the bush versus One Nation.
It's going to be between One Nation and the Climate 200 independent, Millthorpe. So Farley, I think, is definitely the most capable candidate.
Now, because there was a lot of sport on, you may well have missed last night's show. Another reminder, be here on a Sunday night. First big bite at that opinion apple, and we take a big juicy one every Sunday night. I showed you a rather shocking number to me, but I always like to tell you the truth so nobody wakes up surprised the day after the election. It is that Sydney-backed Teal, who is currently leading the betting markets to win the seat. The assumption that it's going to be centre-right, well, no. Michelle Millthorpe, it's all orange, but there's plenty of Teal money and Teal support and Teal media and all the rest of it. Massive favourite right now, according to Sportsbet, $1.91. One Nation is down to third at $4.33. That price has actually blown out a little bit in the past 24 hours. The Nationals, because the presumption being that if the Nationals finish second, well, One Nation Liberal Party preferences get them up and it ends up being a fight that way. But always interesting and important to have a look at. That said, again, when there's a little bit of data, I'll show you. That's where the money markets go. They can often be quite predictive. Yes, big asterisk. 2019 when the betting market said that it was going to be Bill Shorten, and they actually paid out on Bill Shorten. But the money markets were right on Trump. They were right on Albanese, not once but twice. Are they right when it comes to Farah? We'll all find out. The Australia Institute, left-leaning Greens think tank, had an opinion poll that was out there today. I've got to say some of their logic and the explaining of it was a little hard to get my head around, but still, One Nation apparently is leading in the choices, not just potentially a primary, but potentially when it comes to preferences. What you're going to do with your number two. The party dominated the preference vote in almost every age category. So the majority of 18 to 34s will preference One Nation, regardless of who they vote for first. The same for 35 to 50 and 51 to 65. But then it is the teal that is currently leading when it comes to preferences. That is why this thing becomes very, very tight, and why the reality is what people do with their number two matters in the voting booth, but it also matters on the how to vote cards.
If the Liberal Party and the National Party decide that they like a Climate 200 candidate over David Farley, then that'll create problems. But let's see how it goes.
All right, thank you to Andrew Clennell for providing so much content for tonight's show. Good program. Watch at 4 o'clock Eastern each and every afternoon here on Sky News. Now come over here because I want to talk about something a bit adult. Okay. I've been trying to work out how to talk about this all day, and I think I've worked out how to talk about this. A lot of people love the internet in Australia, right? It's on our phones, it's laptops, it's, we get what the internet is, Paul. Well, also the truth is that there is a lot of people who decide to use the internet to look for adult material. Now, of course, nobody's watching, if you're looking at your partner. Well, when they introduced all of those laws around the under-16s and social media, guess what they also got through the parliament, and not a lot of people talked about it, presumably because all the politicians wanted to go, nothing to see here. Well, apparently, everyone over the age of 18, if they wish to access such sites, needs to prove their age and identity before being able to get to such sites in Australia. In fact, as this has been explained, the eSafety Commissioner has said that the method of verification is up to the individual companies providing the individual sites, of which definitely no one watching this program has ever seen in their life, as long as it is deemed to be an appropriate age assurance measure. What does that mean? Confirmation by a parent? Hey, Mum, photo ID? Imagine loading that in. Facial age estimation. Well, we all want to look younger, but obviously, does anyone really want to have their photo associated? Credit card checks? Yeah, sure. Here's my financial details. Digital identity wallets or systems and third-party age assurance vendors. This system kicked in today. So ask, of course, the bad sheep of the family whether this system has actually kicked in or not for certain parts of the internet. But one thing has absolutely spiked today, and that's the number of Australians which have gone and downloaded a VPN, a virtual private network. If you have one of these, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, what it means is that whatever device you're on, you're able to flick a switch and then pretend that your phone, tablet or laptop is in another country or is not from your house. This is a way some people watch movies or TV from the other side of the world legally, and they're able to do so. It is not illegal to have a VPN in Australia. And why am I talking about this at all? It's an adult and uncomfortable topic. The feedback may well be because this story may be of interest to the majority of Australians, whether they wish to admit it or not. We spent a bit of time today trying to look at the actual numbers and the research and all the rest of it about just how interested people may be in the topic. All I will say is the evidence would suggest a few people are interested in this particular topic. Now, let's get to our regular off and on again segment where we have a look at how the politicians amongst us, well, they spend our money. Not only do you have to pay for them to be the MP, you have to pay their staffers to help them make crap social media videos where they get to talk to everyone like they're play school hosts, like a Green senator from Western Australia.
We dance, we kiss, we schmooze, we carry on, we go home happy. What do you say? Come on.
People are going to get hurt, aren't they?
Nah, I mean, it's, it's a possibility. It happens. It's war, but what can I tell you?
You know the voice is James Wood's a massive Republican, right? No, he thought it was a Simpsons grab. Or what about this one from a Labor MP, again, acting like the host of Romper Room? Oh, and our favourite, one of our favourites. Is there a night where we don't get something to point out from this MP from the Labor Party?
If you don't like the way I talk, then why am I on your mind?